You're looking at a picture taken in 1890. It shows two young children standing side by side, a girl who looks about 9 and a boy who seems around 5. They're holding hands. At first, it seems like a normal family photo. The picture itself is in rough shape. Water damage, fading, and stains have hidden a lot of the details over more than a century. But in 2023, a photo restoration specialist in Vermont cleaned it up for a family history project. During that work, she noticed something that made her contact the police right away. What she found didn't point to a sweet sibling moment. It pointed to captivity. This was not a portrait of two siblings. It was a photo of a kidnapped girl and a young boy she was told to pretend was her brother. If you want to understand how a simple family picture from 1890 became evidence in one of the most unsettling child abduction cases of the late 1800s, and what the restoration uncovered about what happened to these children, keep watching. In August 2023, a photo conservator named Emily Richardson received a box of old family photos from a client, David Hendress, in Burlington, Vermont. David's elderly aunt had recently passed away, and while going through her things, he found a group of Victorian-era photos he wanted restored. Most of them were typical portraits from that time, showing serious-faced relatives dressed in formal clothing. But one photo looked different. It showed two children standing against a plain backdrop. The girl wore a simple dark dress and looked about 9. The boy, dressed plainly as well, seemed to be around 5. They were holding hands. What made the photo stand out was a message written on the back in faded pencil. Sarah and Thomas, 1890. May God have mercy on their souls. David had never heard these names in his family history. He had studied his aunt's genealogy closely, and there were no records of Sarah or Thomas. No missing children. No early deaths. It was as if they didn't exist in the family line. Emily started restoring the photo. It was badly damaged with heavy fading, stains, and tears, so recovering the lost details would take weeks. As she worked, certain things began to bother her. The first thing she noticed was their expressions. Children in old photos often looked serious because of long exposure times, but this was different. The girl's expression showed fear, something Emily had seen before while restoring old crime photos. The second thing was the way they were holding hands. It didn't look like two kids posing together. The girl's grip looked tight, her knuckles tense, her fingers wrapped firmly around the boy's small hand. The boy's posture made it seem like he was being held in place rather than standing there on his own. The third detail was the one that shocked her most. When she enhanced the background, she realized that behind them was a wall with something that had been hidden by damage. Iron chains attached to the wall, hanging down about 3 to 4 feet, at a height that could restrain a child. Emily immediately contacted David. Together, they started digging into where the photo might have come from. David's aunt, Margaret, had never talked about the picture. She kept it hidden in a locked box in her attic, along with some old newspaper clippings that David hadn't looked at closely before. When he finally read them, the story began to come together. One clipping from September 14th, 1890, reported that a 9-year-old girl named Sarah Mitchell had gone missing. Another clipping from October 3rd said her mother passed away from grief while the search continued. A third clipping from November 21st described two unidentified children found deceased in an abandoned house in Woodstock, with investigators still trying to learn who they were. Margaret, David's aunt, had been born in 1888. She would have been only 2 years old in 1890. Far too young to remember anything clearly, but her mother, who was David's great-grandmother, had saved these newspaper clippings and the photo for a reason. Emily and David brought everything to Dr. Catherine Morris, a historian at the University of Vermont who studies crime from the Victorian period. She searched through the archives and found the full case file on the disappearance of Sarah Mitchell. It had been a major story in Burlington in 1890, but was later pushed aside and forgotten. What she uncovered was a record of a failed investigation and 2 children who suffered greatly. The photo Emily restored turned out to be the only known picture of Sarah and the boy she was trying to protect. It was taken by the person who had taken them, kept as a disturbing keepsake. When Emily completed the digital restoration of their faces, the results were difficult to look at. Dr. Morris asked a forensic psychologist, Dr. James Patterson, to review the image because he specialized in reading expressions in old crime photos. He began with the girl, Sarah. Her expression was not the usual still, serious look often seen in photos from that time. Her face showed clear signs of fear and stress. Her eyes were opened wider than normal, and even in the bright lighting, her pupils looked larger than they should. She wasn't looking at the camera. Her eyes were turned slightly to the left, toward the person holding it, as if she was silently asking for help. Her eyebrows were raised and pulled inward, and the lines between them were deep. Her mouth was tight and tense, with her lips pressed together. Her jaw looked strained, and the shape of her face suggested she hadn't been eating well. Dr. Patterson explained that the combination of these signs pointed to a child who had been under constant stress for a long time. He said she looked like she understood she was in danger and was trying to communicate that through the only means she had, her expression. Then Emily zoomed in further. In the reflection in Sarah's eyes, she could see a faint outline of the person behind the camera. It looked like an adult man standing with something long in his right hand, possibly an object used to threaten or control the children. It suggested Sarah wasn't just frightened. She was being forced to pose. Next was a younger boy, likely Thomas. His face showed something different. Instead of fear, he looked empty without emotion. His eyes didn't focus on anything. His mouth was slightly open. It was as if he wasn't fully aware of what was happening around him. Dr. Patterson said this could be a sign that he had withdrawn emotionally to cope with what he had been through. He explained that children under extreme stress sometimes shut down as a way to protect themselves. His appearance suggested he had not been properly cared for. His face looked thin, and his features were tired. When Emily enhanced the details of their clothes and skin, she saw that both children were wearing clothing that was dirty, worn, and didn't fit well. Their outfits didn't match the clean, tidy clothing usually seen in old portrait photos. Sarah's dress looked stained around the collar and sleeves. Both children had marks on their wrists and hands that looked like they may have come from tight bindings. The boy's neck also showed dark areas that looked like they could have been caused by pressure. Both children appeared noticeably thin, their hands and wrists showing how little they had been eating. This photo wasn't showing two well-cared-for children. It was capturing two children who had been mistreated and controlled. What changed this image from simply unsettling to clear evidence of crime was what Emily uncovered behind them. At first, the background looked like a plain dark backdrop, but as she repaired the damage and adjusted the contrast, something different came into view. The background wasn't a studio wall. It was a real room, likely a basement or cellar, based on a rough stone or brick surface that became visible. Attached to that wall, about 4 or 5 feet above the floor, were metal restraints sized for a child. Emily reached out to Dr. Robert Hayes, a historian who studies 19th century buildings and household items. He confirmed that the metal pieces looked like old iron wall restraints once used in institutions. They were heavy, attached to the wall with brackets, and connected to short chains ending in cuffs. Their size and placement suggested they were meant for someone small. In the enhanced image, the restraints were clear. They were on either side of where the children stood, almost as if the children had been released from them only moments before the photo was taken. The chains looked worn, and there were dark patches on the floor below them. These stains suggested that people had been kept there for long periods. As Emily continued her restoration on the rest of the room, more details appeared. The walls were rough and unfinished. It looked like a basement with small high windows that seemed blocked. No natural light came through. The scene was lit only by the equipment used to take the photo. In one corner, there was what looked like a thin mattress or bedding on the floor, hinting that someone had been kept there for more than a short time. Near the children's feet was a metal container, likely used because the room did not have normal facilities. The overall setting was clear. This was not a living space. It was a room designed to keep someone confined, and in this case, it appeared to have been used to hold children. Photography experts helped Dr. Morris study how the picture was taken. The lighting, camera position, and composition showed that the person behind the camera knew what they were doing. This wasn't a quick snapshot. It was a planned portrait. Someone brought proper equipment into a basement cell, took two children from their restraints, positioned them carefully, and photographed them while keeping control over them. This photo wasn't taken by any official group or for investigative reasons. It was taken by the person holding them. It was a picture meant for that individual's own use. Based on the date written on the image, 1890, and the newspaper reports about Sarah Mitchell's disappearance and the later discovery of two unidentified children, this photograph was likely taken only shortly before the children's lives ended. This was one of the final photos ever taken of Sarah Mitchell, and possibly the only image of the young boy found with her. When Dr. Morris reviewed the full case file from Vermont State Archives, she uncovered a history of missteps and poor handling that left two children unprotected. The abduction. Sarah Mitchell, age 9, went missing from her home in Burlington on September 12, 1890. She had been playing in her yard in the late afternoon. When her mother called her inside for supper, Sarah was no longer there. There were no witnesses and no clear signs of what had happened. Sarah's mother, Elizabeth Mitchell, reported her missing right away. Burlington police opened an investigation. The lead investigator, Detective Robert Carrington, was a longtime member of the police force. According to files, his efforts were limited. He spoke with neighbors, checked train stations, and searched the nearby woods, but found nothing. After only 2 weeks, he announced that Sarah had likely run away or had an accident near the lake, then closed the active search. Elizabeth pleaded for him to keep looking. She insisted Sarah would never leave on her own. She asked him not to give up. Carrington told her there was nothing more he could do and moved on to other cases. 3 weeks after Sarah's disappearance, Elizabeth Mitchell passed away. While her death was listed as pneumonia, her family believed the stress and grief overwhelmed her. The suspect, who was ignored, Dr. Morris, uncovered something striking in the archive files. There had been a promising lead. Several neighbors reported seeing a man in the area the day Sarah disappeared. He didn't live nearby, and witnesses said he had been watching children play. He left shortly before Sarah went missing. Witnesses described him as a well-dressed man in his late 40s to mid-50s, carrying a leather bag that could have held camera equipment, and driving a small wagon. One neighbor even wrote down the wagon's registration number and gave it to police. Detective Carrington noted this information, but did nothing with it. He didn't look up the wagon owner or talk to the man. He didn't follow up at all. Dr. Morris found a reason in the Burlington Social Register from 1890. The wagon belonged to Harold Petton, age 51, a wealthy businessman, hobby photographer, and well-known figure in town. He served on business boards, was active in local government, and donated to the police department. He was also a personal friend and business partner of Detective Carrington. Carrington had protected his friend by refusing to investigate the only solid lead in Sarah's case, the discovery. On November 20th, 1890, more than 2 months after Sarah went missing, 2 hunters found an old abandoned house in the woods near Woodstock, about 60 miles from Burlington. In the basement, they found the bodies of 2 children, a girl around 9 or 10 and a boy around 5 or 6. Their deaths were attributed to neglect and exposure, and their appearance showed they had not been properly cared for. Both had marks on their wrists and ankles, suggesting they had been restrained. The boy's identity was never discovered. Records list him only as unknown child, Woodstock, 1890. The girl was later confirmed to be Sarah Mitchell because she had a small mark on her left shoulder that her mother had described. The case mishandled again. Police learned that Harold Petton had purchased the abandoned house 6 months before Sarah's disappearance, using a false name. Even with this information, he was never arrested or questioned publicly. Detective Carrington, who had already dismissed a key lead involving Petton during the missing persons investigation, was assigned to the case again. He concluded there wasn't enough evidence to link Petton to the deaths. The case was closed without identifying a suspect. Harold Petton passed away peacefully in 1903 at age 64, still respected in the community. He was never held responsible. A final discovery. Dr. Morris uncovered one more piece of information that explained why the photograph existed at all. While studying Petton's background, she found records that had been sealed for more than a century and had only recently been made available to researchers. Harold Petton was not acting alone. He had been connected to a hidden group, the Network. In the late 1800s, there was a secret circle of wealthy men who called themselves collectors. They targeted children, took them from their families, and hid their actions behind money and influence. Many were businessmen, public figures, and respected members of their communities. They used coded messages in certain newspapers to communicate. They also traded photographs with each other and visited each other's properties. The photo of Sarah and the unknown boy wasn't just something Peton kept for himself. It was something he shared within this group. Dr. Morris found evidence that Peton made several copies using a printing method common in the 1890s and mailed them to others through coded exchanges. The photo served several purposes. It showed what he had done to gain status within the group. It acted as proof of his involvement. It was something he could trade with other members. The writing on the back of the photo, Sarah and Thomas 1890, may God have mercy on their souls, was not Peton's handwriting. It was added later by someone else. How the photograph reached David's family. Dr. Morris traced the photo's history and found a difficult truth. David's great-great-grandmother, Martha Hendris, had been the closest friend of Elizabeth Mitchell, Sarah's mother. After Elizabeth passed away, Martha promised herself she would keep searching for answers about what happened to Sarah. In 1903, when Harold Peton died, rumors around town linked him to Sarah's disappearance, though nothing had ever been made public. Wanting to know more, Martha contacted Peton's housekeeper, who was sorting through his belongings. Martha asked if anything in the house might relate to Sarah. The housekeeper, who had long felt uneasy about her employer, quietly gave Martha a box she had found hidden in Peton's study. Inside were many photos of children, all taken in the same basement setting. She told Martha to destroy the box and everything in it. Martha kept only one picture photo of Sarah. She wrote the message on the back, placed it with the old newspaper clippings about Sarah's disappearance, and locked it away. She couldn't bring herself to throw it out. It was the only image of her friend's daughter, and the only proof of what Sarah had gone through. The photo was later passed down to the family, from Martha to her daughter, then to Margaret, David's aunt. Each generation kept it hidden, unable to look at it but unable to let it go, until 2023, when David sent it for restoration, not knowing the story behind it. Only then, 133 years later, did the full truth come to light, a step toward justice. Thanks to Dr. Morris's research and Emily's restoration work, the Vermont State Police reopened the Sarah Mitchell case in 2024 as a historical review. Although Harold Peton had passed away long ago, the findings encouraged further investigation into the group he had been involved with. Researchers are now working to identify children and other old photographs found in archives and understand the full history of the network. Sarah Mitchell and the boy found with her are now honored at the Vermont Children's Memorial in Burlington. The plaque reads, Sarah Mitchell, 1881 to 1890, and an unknown boy who died with her, victims of wrongdoing hidden behind respectability. May they rest in peace. The photograph was donated to the Vermont Historical Society, where it is used to teach about child protection, the misuse of power, and the importance of listening to and safeguarding vulnerable children. The story of Sarah Mitchell and the unknown boy is more than a tragedy locked inside a faded photograph. It is a reminder of how vulnerable children once were, how systems meant to protect them often failed, and how silence allowed those with influence to hide behind their reputations. For over a century, the truth sat inside a small wooden box, hidden away in attics and closets, passed down quietly through generations who knew only that the image inside carried pain. No one touched it, no one spoke of it, and no one dared to destroy it. The photograph survived because every person who inherited it felt its weight, even without knowing the details. They sensed it mattered. The work of Emily Richardson and Dr. Catherine Morris did more than restore an old image. It restored lost voices. By uncovering the layers of damage, restoring the children's faces, unraveling the hidden history, and reopening a forgotten case, they gave Sarah and the boy a measure of acknowledgement long denied to them. Their story finally stepped into the light, not as a frightening legend, but as a truth grounded in evidence, research, and compassion. When the case was reopened in 2024, it served as a reminder that justice is not always tied to time. Even though the events happened more than 130 years earlier, and the people responsible were long gone, the truth still mattered. It mattered for Sarah, for the unknown boy, and for every child whose story never made it into a newspaper or archive. It mattered for families who lost children without answers. And it mattered for a state and a community that had once accepted the simple explanation that a girl had wandered off and vanished. The modern review of the case did not aim to prosecute anyone. That was no longer possible. Instead, it aimed to document the truth openly, responsibly, and respectfully. It aimed to acknowledge what happened so future generations could learn from it. Investigators, historians, archivists, and child welfare experts began working together to identify the children in the other photographs found in old collections. Many of the images have been mislabeled, misfiled, or forgotten entirely. Now, they are part of a larger effort to understand how an organized group managed to operate in secrecy during a time when communities were smaller, but silence was larger. Sarah's story has now become part of a wider conversation about historical child protection failures. In the 1800s, there were far fewer systems in place to protect children. Many families lived in rural or isolated areas. Communication was slow. Law enforcement had limited oversight, and wealthy individuals often held unquestioned influence. This environment made it easier for wrongdoing to go unnoticed or be dismissed. When the original investigator ignored the most crucial lead, the system closed around that decision. Without accountability or review, the case fell through the cracks. Today, as researchers and child advocacy groups work through the archive materials connected to Network Peton belonged to, they are not only piecing together names and dates, they are also studying how such groups operated, how they avoided discovery, and how institutional blind spots of the time allowed them to exist. This work strengthens present-day protections by examining the weaknesses of the past. Every detail collected, every timeline reconstructed, and every photo examined helps create a clearer understanding of how to prevent similar failures in the modern world. One of the most meaningful outcomes of the reopened case is the recognition given to the unknown boy. For more than a century, he did not have a name, a family story, or a place in history. He was simply recorded as Unknown Child, Woodstock, 1890. Now, although his identity is still not known, he is no longer invisible. His image and his story are included alongside Sarah's at the Vermont Children's Memorial. Visitors who stopped to read the plaque learned that he lived, that he mattered, and that he was not forgotten. The memorial does not focus on the details of how the children suffered. Instead, it honors their memory by reminding visitors of what should have been done to protect them and what must be done today to safeguard children everywhere. Schools, child advocacy organizations, and youth support programs in Vermont now use the restored photograph in training sessions and educational workshops. Not as a shocking display, but as a symbol of why child protection laws exist, why oversight matters, and why every missing child case must be taken seriously from the start. The image, once hidden out of fear and sorrow, is now used in a respectful and purposeful way. It stands as a message about compassion, responsibility, and the role communities play in protecting their most vulnerable members. For David, the journey has been personal and profound. He began with a simple goal, to preserve some old family photos as a gift to the next generation. Instead, he uncovered a piece of history that had been carried carefully by his ancestors for over a century. His family's quiet guardianship of the photograph now makes sense. Though none of them knew the details, they understood the image was important. Restoring the photo allowed the truth to surface, and David honored that truth by cooperating fully with investigators and donating the image to the Vermont Historical Society. In doing so, he continued the work that Martha Hendricks began when she refused to look away from her friend's tragedy. Emily Richardson, the conservator whose careful work uncovered the hidden details in the image, often says that restoration is more than fixing damage. It is a way of reconnecting people to history. In this case, it connected modern researchers, families, and community members to a story that needed to be acknowledged. Her restoration work opened doors to new evidence, new inquiries, and new understanding. It also reminded everyone involved that sometimes ordinary tasks, like scanning an old photo, can change the course of forgotten history. Dr. Morris's involvement brought academic insight and emotional balance to the investigation. Her research into the sealed archives, her careful handling of sensitive information, and her dedication to telling the story accurately helped ensure that the children were treated with dignity. She continues to work with other historians to reveal more about the network Peton was part of, all while maintaining a focus on respect and truth. For her, the case is not about fear or sensational stories. It is about ensuring that voices silenced long ago are heard today with compassion and care. Today, Sarah Mitchell's name is spoken again, not as a mystery, but as a young girl whose story finally received the attention it deserved. The unknown boy is no longer lost to history. Their lives are remembered not for how they ended, but for how they inspired change long after. Their photograph, once locked away in a box, is now a symbol of accountability. While justice in the traditional sense is no longer possible, the truth now belongs to the public. It is documented, preserved, and taught, and that truth can inspire protection, vigilance, and empathy. The story of Sarah and the boy reminds us that communities must stay alert, that authority must always be questioned when something feels wrong, and that every child deserves safety, attention, and belief. Their story encourages modern society to look back not with fear, but with determination to do better. In every generation, there must be people like Martha, who refuse to let memories fade. People like Emily, who look closely and uncover what others overlook. People like Dr. Morris, who investigate until the answers are found. And people like David, who carry the truth forward with care. As the case rests now in the hands of historians, advocates, and educators, Sarah Mitchell and the unknown boy have become symbols of resilience in memory. Their story, once hidden, now serves a purpose: to teach, to protect, and to ensure that no child is ever ignored again. Their lives mattered. Their story matters. And because it is now known, their voices will not fade away. The legacy of this case continues to grow as more people learn about it. Teachers, museum archivists, and community leaders in Vermont often reference Sarah's story when discussing the importance of record-keeping, honest reporting, and transparency within public institutions. It serves as a reminder that history is not just made of victories and celebrated figures. It is also shaped by the quiet truths that were once set aside, the stories that were nearly forgotten, and the individuals who refused to let silence win. Local families who visit the Vermont Children's Memorial often leave flowers, drawings, or handwritten notes addressed to the two children, even though no one alive today knew them personally. These small gestures show that compassion can travel across generations. They also show that acknowledgement, even long after the fact, carries real meaning. As researchers continue piecing together the identities of other children connected to the network, Sarah and the unknown boy remain the center of the story. Their photographs spark the investigation, their names anchor memorial, and their memory guides the work being done today. Their story, once hidden in a box, now stands as a lasting reminder that truth is power, even when it arrives more than a century late.